We've had a successful turnaround and a not so successful turnaround. They're very capital and time intensive.
You're going to be paying in time, energy, stress, sleepless nights, putting money in. In this session, we can talk about what happens after you've bought a business and talk about your philosophy and approach to integration, either integration of the businesses or just the back office of the business, and also exits as well. I'd be very interested to know your experience of selling a business. So what would you say are the most important parts that require your attention as the new owner of a business once you've bought the company?
Well, one area I think is probably company culture. Obviously, this will depend on the size of the business, but you can often have clashes of culture, particularly if you already run a business and you're buying another business, and the people in these businesses, cultures, it's something I've never really thought about until sort of quite recently, where actually that can really be a bit of a resistance in terms of integration and things like that. So that's a big thing to look out for and to manage. And yeah, the integration in general. So you talk about back office systems, it can be an incredible amount of time and effort taken to actually get to grips with the system and access systems, procedures, making yourself, if you've got anybody in the business that's going to take over roles in the new business, obviously getting that handover is incredibly important, making sure the business owner or the previous business owner sticks around to iron out any kinks, basically, which is incredibly hard when you've made them multimillionaires and they just want to go.
I was going to say they've already booked the world cruise.
They do, yeah, often.
And you see the dust as they as they run out of the building.
Yeah, choking on that dust, yeah.
So the people, the culture is absolutely essential. The handover period. Do you ever designate a minimum handover period or do you play it by ear?
Well, typically it's at least the length of the deferred payments, if there are any, for me anyway, just because whilst I'm getting to grips with the business or whilst my team are getting to grips with the business, that entire period, it could take up to 6 months before certain things come out of the woodwork. Typically 6 months as a minimum. Although having said that, I have had one handover that was a few weeks, only because the business was integrated so beautifully with one that we already own that it almost didn't need a handover. But other than that, as one exception, yeah, as long as possible. I'm not saying the ex-business owner needs to work in the business per se, and they shouldn't if I've bought the right business. But, having them around just helps with little things, handovers, accounts, passwords, that sort of thing.
Interesting idea, actually, tying it in with the duration of any deferred element of the purchase price, because it's kind of psychologically you're keeping them on side, aren't you? And they feel like they have a vested interest in making sure the business is successful because they've got that payment coming up, rather than nothing to do with me anymore. It's now your obligation to pay me regardless of what happens. So it keeps them close. It maintains a relationship, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I've never been unlucky enough to have a business owner that's like that. It's your problem now, whatever. In fact, a lot of them, 2 or 3 of them sort of wanted to be involved in the business post handover period, where they've said, I want to get, because they're passionate, and so much so one of them actually didn't want me to change the name of the business. It was his sort of surname, and I wasn't going to anyway. But he's quite passionate, but he does remind me when a deferred payment's coming up. I get the email. I say, well, you need to pass it on to the finance team. No, I just thought I'd drop you an email, But yeah, because
they did the deal with you.
They did the deal with me.
That's
right. So they're just an email a couple of days before, like clockwork. So but they see that the business, has to continue to be successful for me to pay, even though I have to pay. If it's successful or not in a deferred payment situation, they still want, to make sure. I've been quite lucky with some of my sellers, basically. They've been quite passionate and very helpful. Others not so helpful, but none have been sort of, out the door, gone, not wanting to do anything with it. So yeah, I've been quite lucky in that regard.
Finances. How do you take control of the finances?
So we've got an incredibly fantastic, this is one of the things that I've centralized, is the finance function in general. So we do that from our office for all the businesses. So we've got a credit controller, finance manager and a commercial director that are all central. So they work for our business and they sort of take over. They're veterans in their field. That tends to work quite well. Again, I guess it comes back to deal team, doesn't it? So that operational handover is very easy. These are sort of, they've been through the wars. They're not young people without experience, so they can take over all different systems, Sage, Zeros, all that sort of stuff, and we can just adopt it really quickly. So I think that in terms of the finances, it's one of the things we get on top of straight away, looking at things like, right, what are all these massive string of direct debits? Which ones do we actually need? Cancel all of them, and anything that's important, we'll get a phone call.
Are you a people person? Is that something that you do?
Some people say I am, and some people say I'm not. So I wouldn't like to comment on it myself. I guess it depends. I don't know. But I like to think I am. I like to meet the people. Where possible and practical, because I like to see who are the guys actually earning the money, in the business. So I like to really get to the nitty gritty of it all. Very detail oriented. So which can be a pain for a lot of people, but
okay.
I am,
okay.
yeah. So
I think that's beneficial in this situation.
I like to get to know people. We have come up against culture clashes and things like that, and people working in different ways. And as businesses get bigger, these are the sorts of things you need to think about. Words you've only really read, like stakeholder engagement, all of a sudden become really important. And it's managing that and having a good team. I think a lot of what I do comes back to the fact that I've got a good team that are far more experienced than I am in a lot of different sectors, especially the weakness areas for me. So like legal, for example, I'm pretty good being detail oriented, but I go through too much and I'm just, I'm knackered. So
it's interesting you should say that. So you compensate for the areas that you're not so good at with people who excel in those areas. And surely that is the basis of a great team, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's the deal team. It's my central team. So, commercial, operational. Again, commercial and operational can clash quite a lot. Commercial want to do new things to make money. Operational, like, we can't interfere with what we're doing. So there's all these little things that are going off that you've got to manage. So operational, commercial, finance. We got probably a team of 10 now that are central. And obviously, that's paid for with management fees from the different businesses, because obviously my business doesn't make money. All it does is buy and sell businesses. So we have to, kind of our bread and butter is management fees, things like that. So we're up to a team of 10 now centrally, which I think is quite a lot in terms of given that's all we do.
If you want to find out how to buy a business successfully, get your free business buying toolkit. The link is in the video description below.
Do you buy and rebrand? Do you keep the branding of the businesses? Do you do it on an ad hoc basis depending upon possibly the reputation of the business that you've bought?
A bit of both, which I know is quite a political answer, but we tend to, for the majority of our acquisitions, we keep the branding because there's some brand affinity, or they're known in the local area, or whatever it is. It might be it's beneficial for us not to rebrand, particularly when for some of our businesses, they're landlords as well for the freehold properties, so we don't want to ruffle the feathers of relationships with really key people. So a lot of the time we keep it the same. However, in quite recently we've invested in an infrastructure business, a sort of a electric vehicle charging business, and what we're doing with that is to grow that. We're buying businesses which make sense vertically. So we're looking at buying an electrical contractor.
Yes.
But in that situation, we probably will rebrand because there's not a lot of brand affinity per se in the businesses that we're targeting, and we're trying to build this brand right. So we want all the different stakeholders to all be branded.
Increase the overall value
exactly,
of that, couldn't you?
Exactly, yeah. Trademarks, things like that, intellectual property. So, we do a bit of both. But traditionally, we've always just kept the name. We only target profitable, good businesses. We don't like turnarounds. We've accidentally done one before and it worked.
I've accidentally bought a
turnaround. Yeah. Well, this is profitable, not as profitable as what you said it was. So we've had a turnaround, but we do target profitable businesses. So in that case, there's no real need to fix what isn't broken.
I agree, and I like your philosophy of buying successful, profitable businesses that make money from day one, even when the owner isn't there, which is the philosophy that we subscribe to here at Dealmakers. I also have the same opinion about turnarounds. I've done turnarounds and actually been really, really successful. And I've had turnarounds where I've given up and realised that it was never going to happen, and everything was against me, and it just wasn't worth doing. Have you had your fingers burnt on a turnaround, which is why that's not your thing?
So we've had a successful turnaround and a not so successful turnaround. And I think the thing is they're very capital and time intensive,
yes.
And we've ended up buying the business efficiently from a cost perspective to just dumping loads of money into it post-transaction anyway. Yeah. So what was the point? And then that return on investment, whilst positive, actually, if that money would have been invested over here,
Yes.
or we'd have reduced our leverage over there, would have been a better return. So, you live and learn, but it happens sometimes. You can't avoid it. Sometimes you can do as much due diligence as possible, and something will always, sideline you or something.
Yeah.
So it's quite unfortunate. It was. One of them was successful, really successful. I don't like doing turnarounds. I prefer to buy the established, profitable businesses where we can add value sort of strategically with what we already own, rather than go to the great effort of just knackering the whole team trying to do a turnaround. It's not what we do. It's not really in our skill set.
And you're right. It's a different skill set. I mean, I always say to people, especially for beginners, people buying a business for the first time, avoid the £1, the $1 deal, because it may look an amazing bargain because you're not paying anything, but you're going to be paying in time, energy, stress, sleepless nights, maybe putting money in. So it looks like you're not paying anything, but you will pay.
Yeah.
So this philosophy of, buy a business for $1, for £1, turn it around, become a hero, make a fortune. I mean, that is such a flight of fancy. It's just not based in reality.
No, it's sort of pie in the sky, isn't it? Especially for people, and often the people thinking that are the ones that haven't got a lot of experience. So it's kind of like, well, that is the worst place to start. For somebody who hasn't done an acquisition, even a business owner that started from scratch, in terms of turnarounds, it is so skills-based, time critical, all the rest of it, all the nasty stuff, all in a great big bag. It's the worst place to start. Buy something profitable, increase your own business by buying a competitor or a supplier or something like that.
Exactly.
Don't go into turnarounds. That's another piece of advice I give from my experience. Don't do it.
Acquisition criteria. We talked about culture. We've talked about the money. We've talked about branding and integration. What other things do people need to consider when it comes to after they bought the business? Maybe they bought a couple of businesses. What should they be thinking about?
Well, if they've already integrated, I'd say, well, what's the plan? What's the exit strategy if that's what you're looking to do? I mean, we're very transactional in terms of we buy stuff in order to sell stuff. That is what we do. So maybe I'm probably speaking from a little bit of a different field. I'd say, what is the plan? Are you looking to build your business bigger? Are you looking to exit? Because there are things you ought to really be doing if you are looking to exit. The way you format the business, who's in the business, are your team in the business? So for me, when we buy a business, I make sure that my team, our business, is sort of, I know the typical cliche of working on it, not in it, but I don't want any of my team to become operational in their role within the business that we've bought, because then I can't sell it unless they're happy to go. So I think it's that traditional age-old, make sure you're redundant completely from the business so that if you're run over tomorrow, the business still operates. Yes. And we go to great lengths to buy businesses that are not owner operated. And if they are, again, it's a lot of work to make them not owner operated. And we haven't got the time to run businesses. So we need to buy things that are sort of perfect anyway in that regard, in order to then be able to resell or actually add value in an effective way without having to run the business as well. So I think that's another important thing, just sort of skipping around there.
And this also comes back to the larger deals.
Yeah.
Because the smaller deals are owner operated because they can't afford to have other people running it. There isn't enough spare cash to employ those people. So the owner has to do 3 jobs themselves in order to make ends meet. So when you go for that larger business, it comes with a management team, because a single individual is unlikely to be owner operating, managing a multi-million-pound business.
That's right.
There's always exceptions, but not likely to be that person.
Yeah, so that's what we target. And that's another reason for doing the bigger deals. It's not just the lending criteria and the return on investment for us. It's is it saleable? Does it have an incumbent management team? Does it have a management team that are not going to leave? So going back to this due diligence again, kind of getting a bit technical, but making sure that the people that are incumbent in the business don't have some sort of connection to the previous owner, whether it be family, friends, because they'll go. Every single time 100%. That I've done a deal, they leave. Some of them might stay a little bit longer.
Despite those reassurances, oh no, they're happy here, they're never going anywhere. They will walk out.
Yeah, no, they do eventually. And we've had it. Really, it should make sense, shouldn't it? If you want to sell this business, another buyer will want to buy it typically as an investment. So they don't want to be working in the business. So surely that should be the aim anyway. Whether you're looking to exit or not, you should build to exit because it's good for you as well, isn't it? Ultimately, you want to earn the money and not have to do the work, because if you do the work, you can't invest more.
Buying a business is a roller coaster, which is why you need a lawyer who knows what he is doing. So why not use mine? His name is John Andrews, and you can find his contact details below this video.
So let's talk about exiting and selling. You've sold businesses.
Yes.
And tell us some top tips, if you like, the things that you've learned from that experience that would help others.
So again, make sure you haven't got any operational role. Make sure anybody on your team, if you do have another business, don't have operational role. Good books, tidy it up, make sure there's not a lot of debt there. Provided you've been building towards exit, it should be pretty easy. But, make yourself attractive. What makes you different? Are you profitable? Keep an eye on your management accounts. So all the way through, you should have monthly management accounts from day one, or day one of acquisition, or day one of building, or whatever. And you should keep an eye on the numbers, because obviously that's what any buyer is going to scrutinize. So, think about what you'd want to buy. You need to build towards that, don't you? Naturally. This is speaking to anyone, whether you've acquired or started a business. Work towards what you'd want to buy, and make contact with competitors, suppliers. I know it seems a bit counterintuitive, but oftentimes I know people who have approached competitors, or competitors have approached them, and actually that's been the exit when it wasn't planned to be the exit, So
would you want to buy a business that relied upon one talented individual where 50% of the contract value of the company was with one company, and that was on a rolling 30 days that could be cancelled at any time? Yeah. Are those the sorts of things that you would want to buy? No, they wouldn't be. So make sure your business isn't one of those.
Yeah, that's an important point, actually, is what they call the client quantum. So if you've got a high percentage of your turnover, reliant on one client, that's then a risk. So especially if for example, I know a lot of people like to use invoice finance to raise capital or to acquire businesses. Well, they're not going to like large customer concentrations either. Mm-hmm. So, the ability to purchase is going to be hindered. So it's just those little elements, and actually another thing as well is make the business as financeable as possible to a buyer, because you'll open up your range of buyers as well. And I know that's a bit harder if you've bought the business and financed it, but, just it should be quite.
I mean, there is an approach which is quite an interesting one that I used on one occasion, where you actually get an agreement in principle for finance for the business that you can then present to that potential buyer and say, look, we've actually got the finance agreed in principle. All you have to do is sign here and you'll get the finance to buy the business. You present it to them as a fait accompli. I mean, you can't always do it, but if you can do it, it's a nice way of greasing the wheels.
We'll provide the vendor finance as well. So when there's been a couple of sales I've done where I've sort of deferred half of the purchase price just to make it, attractive
appealing
to a buyer,
or easier to buy,
or at least not because there aren't the buyers, but so it's easier to buy. Yeah, and I'll say, look, we know how this works. We're a buyer's dream because we're buyers. So actually, we know what you're going to want to do, and we've laid it all out for you. I mean, we've not gone so far as to get the financing principle, but now you've mentioned it.
You could do that as well.
Yeah.
And then make up the difference with a deferred element, and you know exactly what security you want, and you know exactly what terms you want. So basically, you make it easy for them, don't you?
Yeah, that's right.
What would you like to share with our listeners that would help them on their acquisition journey?
Build a deal team, I think, or at least they don't have to be on the team, but for me, there's the three main elements. There's a good commercial solicitor, a good accountant, and somebody commercial who knows the industry that you're in, especially if you don't know it yourself. So one of the things is, I didn't know some of the industries that we work in. So what we do is we buy that expertise in. So our commercial director, for example, is 25 years served in the industries that we buy in. So it's quite important to have that deal team to amplify your deal making ability. So for me, the sorts of deals we do now, I couldn't do on my own. Well, simply because of the sheer amount of hours, but also the different expertise as well. So I think having a good team for me is my mantra. That is, you've got to get the team first if you can. I know that, again, that's sort of chicken and egg, but if you run a business already, you should have some elements there,
yes,
that you can draw upon. But get a good commercial solicitor, good accountant, and a good commercial director, I think, is the three key elements. Obviously, there's more than that, but those are the three important elements for me.
Great advice. Nathan Winch, thank you very much for your time.